On behalf of the Glen Hill American Legion Post, I am Rose Powell from Cedar Springs. American Legion Post 287. This is invitation for the 911 first responders, firemen, women, and children. Dear first responders, this is an invitation to a dinner in your honor at the Glen Hill Post 287, Cedar Springs. On February 20th at 5 p.m. we will be serving Swiss steak and all the trimmings. Your dedication to our community needs honoring, no speeches, just a thank you to you. Dinner is at 5 to 7 p.m. so you can send 2 chefs if possible, so all may attend. What we need from you is a count so we can get in a food order by February 15th. Again, thanking you for your service. Last time we hosted this dinner, we served 120. Let's do more this time. This is from Mary Goler-Kiltz, chairman of the dinner. So you and your families are welcome. The dinner is free. Even if you have friends that you know are 911, any kind of responders, let them know. Get the notice into the American Legion and come and have fun.
Just to repeat that date, Mr. Powell, February 20th. Yes. That's a Monday from the time again?
5 to 7.
5 to 7.
And they need a count by February 15th, please. And it'll be good food because Mary Bowler.
Okay, moving on to section 4, public hearings. Item A, IFT. Oh, I'm sorry. Was there anyone else?
Actually, I have a question as to where my comment should go. I wanted to personally address the issue that 2 gentlemen brought up at the last council meeting. However, being that I have not vetted my thoughts to the rest of the council, I wondered if it would be more appropriate for me to speak in the public forum.
You can.
You're certainly welcome to address it during the citizen public comments. You could also address it during council comments.
There's a bigger audience here now. They can't always hang in, so. So I'm not going to live over on 4th Street. I wanted to address some issues that some gentlemen brought up about the rise in water rates. And I apologize for not getting it out sooner, but I've been in contact with many lawmakers over some issues recently and it fell off my plate. So what I wanted to say is that I recognize that any time a bill goes up, it's a burden. And not being an affluent person myself, I understand that sometimes you're near the edge and that little bit can put you over. And I want to say that I bore them in mind when we voted to raise water rates because our infrastructure is from the 30s. Our state funding and our federal funding is not looking like it's going to increase. And heaven forbid I should ever have to turn on my tap and think, is this water safe for my child? I appreciate that when I flush the toilet, it goes right. And I want to say that I recognize it is a burden, but we needed to do this for the safety and ongoing prosperity of our community. So I understand it wasn't a popular choice, but I felt it was the right choice. And I still stand behind it. But I wanted to at least address that, even though it's my intent to get something in the post tonight.
It's coming Thursday.
Wonderful, because it fell off my head. But thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thanks, Mara.
Thank you. And I'm just going to piggyback off of that, since Ms. Nixon brought it up. Mr. Manager and I have actually put out a statement per your request of each of this, and then he proofread it for facts and making sure we were accurate in our assessment of what we were spending and how much and how it went up and the whole process of it. And that should be available in the post on Thursday?
I made it available to the post on Wednesday yesterday,
It was
but
in.
it didn't make it into the paper
It's in.
today.
Oh, it's in the paper. Okay. And we actually tried to get it together last week, but I was having email problems and was sending it through my other email, and anyway, we were having some difficulties, but we do seem to get it. And I would just like to add on to that, I recently heard on NPR today about the town of Fraser that is going to have to fix a sinkhole that is part of their septic system, and yeah, did you catch the number? 40 million. So I would like to not have that happen to us. I would like to have that fixed before it becomes that large of a problem. And we have had a manhole collapse that we had to fix. We've had water systems wrecked. I remember when you were my next door neighbor and you had a curb floating down.
Yes, my lawn was leaking.
So I mean, there was this piece of curb floating out in the street, which is problematic. So we appreciate the difficulty of this, and I know I've said this multiple times. I grew up in Flint, and I have family that still live there, and the idea that there is water that can kill your child or damage their brain is just not an acceptable thing. And one of the absolutely most critical things that I take as my role on this council, and I know the rest of my council does as well, is that we make this community a safe place to live. And part of that is our water must be safe. And if we have to pay some more to make that happen because it's been neglected for so long, we will do it, even if it's not possible. And I drink this water, I pay this water bill, my children drink this water, my parents drink this water. That's why we do it. So thank you, Mrs. Nixon. I think we're all, I don't want to speak for the council, but I'm sort of speaking for the council. I think that's where we're at. So, here. Okay, so moving on to any other public comment. Okay, hearing none. Moving on to public hearings. Item A, the IFT request for display pack for 2,100 for 2,161,000. See, we can tell this is not in my paycheck rate. $2,161,292 in real property improvements for a length of 12 years. Do I have a motion to open hearing?
I'll make that motion to open the hearing.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The hearing is open. Mr. Manager?
I don't have anything to say. This is a time for the public to make their thoughts known about whether they have any objections or are they in favor of granting this IFT.
Okay. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this matter of the IFT for display pack? You may come on up here.
Donna Clark, 18 North Grant, Cedar Springs Public Library Director. Welcome, I think it's a great idea.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody that was on the IFT committee with you?
I'm on the AFT committee, and we applied the guidelines that are a policy in transition at this point, but a policy of the city. And I believe the recommendation was for 13 years, but the maximum that's available is 12 years. I think Display Pack is doing excellent business in the city, and I think they're well deserving of it.
Okay. I would like to say thank you to the IFT committee for coming up with a policy for this, because previously we did not had a policy, and having voted on these type of things, I felt it difficult to get my arms around exactly what we should be doing. So I really appreciate the legwork that was put into creating policy for this, because policies are helpful. Any other commentary? All right then, I will take a motion to close the hearing.
I'll make that motion too.
I'll second again.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The hearing is closed. Moving on to a public hearing for the Cedar Springs Parks and Recreation Plan. I will take a motion to open a hearing for the Cedar Springs Parks and Recreation Plan.
Madam Chair, I move that we open a hearing for the Parks and Rec plan.
Second.
All those in favor to open the hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The hearing is open. Does anyone at this time wish to speak to the Cedar Springs Parks and Recreation Plan hearing?
Can I speak to it?
You certainly can.
Parks and Rec is a great asset to our community and our townships. They've done great work. And I'm happy to see they've completed their master plan because that affects our whole community and how we get grants and loans and help from everybody. I just saw one error in it that I happened to touch on, and that was that and I'm sure it'll be a simple fix, that the Skinner Field is still written up as being leased, that the school is leasing Skinner Field.
Oh, the 99
Which
years
needs to be corrected, that it's the,
property of the city.
yeah, and that the Friends of Skinner Field is leasing it from the city. That was the only thing I saw that probably should be.
If you could bring those comments to me tomorrow or sometime soon, I will fire them off to the people who do that correction.
Okay. Otherwise, I would support it 100%.
Good catch, Councilor Howell, because I missed that in my skim.
Once in a while, I hear it right.
More than once in a while. Anyone else wish to address this hearing? Okay. Hearing none, I will take a motion to close this hearing.
Madam Chair, I move we close this hearing.
No second then?
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The hearing is closed. Moving on to the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Madam Chair, I would like to add an action item. This would be action item 8J. And this would be the purchase of the Chromebooks, 8 Chromebooks in a price not to exceed $1,500.
Make the motion to approve the agenda with that item added.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Yay?
All those opposed? The agenda is adopted. Moving on to discussion, oh wait. Sorry, scrolling. Moving on to the consent agenda. Council members may request that any or all items be removed from the consent agenda. A motion is sent in order to adopt all items not removed from the consent agenda. Requesting the removal of an item from the consent agenda is a prerogative afforded every council member and does not require the support of other council members. So at this time, do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented? So moved.
Second.
I'll do a roll call since this involves money. So all those in, or, Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Ms. Powell,
Yes.
Ms. Nixon.
Yes.
Mr. Hopkins,
Yes.
Mr. Rose,
Yes.
and Ms. Conley votes yes. The consent item is approved. Moving on to discussion items. 7A, Cedar Springs Brewing, I don't speak German, Cedar Springs Brewery's Cypherfest,
Stark Beer Fest.
Stark Beer Fest. My German grandfather is not entertained with me right now, if he were alive. Community event application for April 1st, 2017. Mr. Manager, would you like to?
Sure. Mr. Ringler, he does a good job with this event, I think. I think there's been some discussion about whether this is truly a public event since it's being held in his private parking lot. But I think the spirit of the community event application is to lessen some of the burdens that city governments can sometimes place upon organizations, one of which is a noise ordinance, which I think is his main concern here. He does bring in a band. They do play in an outside tent. I did attend one of his concerts during the Red Flannel Festival. They're not terribly loud, and it's a business kind of area anyways. So I think he does a good job, and I would recommend approving it. But at this time, just a discussion item. We'll bring it back next month.
Any other council members have any questions, comments, concerns regarding the Start Beer Fest community event application?
I do.
Okay, Mr. Gross?
I was one of those that discussed with the city manager what is the difference between a public event and a promotional event. We had a good discussion on it. I understand what he's saying, and I believe a lot of what he's saying, but I think somewhere we need to have it defined to make a determination of what is strictly promoting a single business versus something that is truly public-wide for the entire community. And this is, and I'm assuming this is part of where our discussion came in. So I agree with the city manager. I just think somewhere along the line here we need to define this as when it becomes, where's the division at? Okay?
I can maybe speak a little bit to this because I think I'm the only person here that was on the council at the time when we drafted this language. But there is, and we were struggling because then the language sort of evaporated for a while, and then we had to re-find it to make it talk nicely to our community event forum. But the spirit of it wasn't to be necessarily that it couldn't be a business promoting a specific thing. That wasn't an exclusion of it. It was to be this idea that we could have a way of waiving specific ordinances for events that a business wanted to do. Our requirements were that they couldn't be exclusionary. They couldn't allow for discrimination policies or to say that specific people weren't allowed if they wanted to do the blessing of the city council. But beyond that, it could be sponsored by an individual business. Like that wasn't a restriction on it. It could be nonprofit, it could be for-profit. It simply couldn't be like we only allow, people to certain things. And churches use it, and school uses it, and Parks and Rec uses it, as well as businesses. So if we want to create a delineation of that, I wouldn't be opposed, but it would require actual changes in the original policy from the way it was crafted.
And I could look at doing that if the council feels it's necessary, but what I told Mr. Gross is I think this is a situation where there's a letter of the law and there's a spirit of the law. And while I agree that the letter of the law is kind of murky, I agree with you, Ms. Conley, that the spirit of the law is pretty obvious.
We also utilized it for things like I remember the car dealership brought in the Vietnam War Memorial. Like that was one. And we waived the parking restriction so that more people could park if they see it. And we had some they could have some additional lighting and I can't remember all the specifics. But each organization comes and asks for the waivers, but that way we can do it as a blanket. Because it used to be that you had to go before the council to ask for each of these things to be waived. And it became cumbersome. So that was sort of the spirit of it. Other questions? I'm trying to remember who crafted it. It was myself and Mr. Benham and Mr. Gomez.
I kind of agree with that too, because if you were, say like Dave, and you were going to have a band past 9 o'clock or whatever, you'd have to get a waiver, and say you might need a little traffic control, you'd have to get a waiver. This way on the community event forum, whatever you're going to have that might affect your surrounding community, it would be in that event forum, and the DPW would know if you needed, or the fire department would know if they needed.
Right.
It just kind of set everything up, so council knew it, everybody involved knew it, the city knew it, the neighbors knew it, and we could proceed
And I think,
in a certain way.
Mrs. Powell, you and I spoke with the folks at Rockford when we were struggling to, after this had been adopted, then like a year later when we were struggling with how to make this work, for example, for the Red Flannel Festival. We went to Rockford to talk about their community event. And they had this page of 20
Yeah, events.
events, many sponsored by businesses, specifically for their chocolate day. That was a group of businesses to come around and get chocolate at each business and see what the businesses look like. And
Partly to prevent people from double booking,
yes,
like as in Morley Park, when somebody wants an event and they want the electricity, and so they come in and they get this form and they fill it out. Well, so-and-so decided they want to do it, so they go down there and plug in all that. Those other people say, well, we did an event and we reserved this. We have to get that figured out because we're going to have more and more events all the time, and we have to know ahead of time who's reserved that water or plug-ins or street or all the way around, is my feeling, is to have it
it's meant to help
on
the
the,
businesses,
yes,
along with nonprofits.
yeah, is my feeling.
So that was the original spirit of the policy. But we can examine that if that's something else.
No, that's fine. What, excuse me, my concern was, and I understand, even his is a public event, because he's inviting the entirety of the public in.
Yes.
Okay, if you had some group that just obviously wasn't something that the public would be interested in, comes in and applies to the same thing. Now we've set it up where something that's promoting is allowing only for a select group
Well,
under
no,
the auspices of saying it's public.
the language of the policies is it has to be
Yes.
open to the entire public.
Okay.
Like, that is part of the language. That was actually one of the things Mr. Benham and I disagreed on, and ultimately the council voted to support this position, that it had to be completely open to the public.
And that was what I was asking. If it was defined,
It is.
if you did define it, and that's just the way it's worded and intended, we just need to have it somewhere where everybody understands that, because I don't see that on the application. All it says is public event.
Pretty sure it does say in the application it has to be open to the public.
May I read the beginning
Sure.
phrase here? It says, in order to be deemed a community event, the event must be open to the public, demonstrate a benefit to the Cedar Springs community, have an estimated attendance of 50 people or more, be non-discriminatory, and be held within the city limits. Is that
Yes.
where this came from?
Yes, that is where that came from. And we can certainly change that policy if it's something people are confused or concerned about, but that is where it came from.
So for the time being, we're only talking about one community.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
Oh,
All right, then any other questions on that? We will move on to the guidelines for the tax, 7B, discussion on the guidelines for the tax abatement status.
so this is very similar to what you guys saw last time. I did add a section regarding LEED certification, which is something I think Sterling Heights had in their policy. Most policies are actually pretty similar to what I've presented to you in the past. I don't know if there's going to be too many businesses taking advantage of LEED certification here in Cedar Springs. So it's obviously something we could leave in there if we want to. We could.
Yeah, I would like it.
Okay. But other than that, I can't think of too many other things that other policies had that we would want. So at this point, I'm going to say this is the last work I'm going to put into this.
Okay.
I can present it to council as an action item next time for adoption.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns from council?
I just want to thank you for putting that lead in. I've been in some lead buildings over by Ada and Cascade, and that's just a wonderful idea. I don't know if they can get more grant money or something for those, but it's a good thing.
Well, I think in addition to getting grant money, it also reduces their ongoing maintenance costs.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And expenses.
They hope.
Yeah.
An example where that didn't work out too well was the New Caledonia Library. They're LEED approved, and they're having all kinds of trouble with their heating and cooling. So I thought Donna and I were visiting over the weekend, and director was explaining how painful it was trying to get cool or get warm in all the places in the building. So it doesn't always work out well, and I think you have to pay for that privilege. Don't you have an application?
I'm sure if it's a certification, you have to pay an application.
Mm-hmm. So, anyway, yeah, but I like the concept anyway.
Any other questions, concerns, discussion on the guidelines for tax abatement status? I would just like to say, again, thank you to the people that worked on that policy. That's something I think we've been totally lacking, and I'm grateful that we now have this thing. Well, we will be having that. All right, item C, discussion item, first reading of humane pet acquisition ordinance. And I think we actually spoke about this, although I think it might have been only in a workshop piece where we talked about it. Mr. Manager?
Sure. So this is the first ordinance I'm bringing to council since August to actually be passed. And so all ordinances have to be viewed twice by council. This is the first time you were seeing this in an effort to pass it. You did see this previously as just a discussion item. So I guess technically it's a discussion item, but I do want to actually read the header of the ordinance as a best practice. So the header of the ordinance is ordinance number 194, an ordinance to add sections 8-73 to 8-78 to Chapter 8, Animals, of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Cedar Springs, Michigan. Now, the background on this, as council's heard, but for the public, is that there have been some pet stores in Michigan, particularly in Macomb County, where this ordinance was originally drafted, and then more recently here in Kent County, although I don't have the information in front of me. So Kent County was approached by the city in which this pet store was located to assist in shutting it down or making it, better and not have puppy mill dogs. So this is the ordinance that was sent out by Kent County to all these cities if they wanted to adopt it. I understand Mr. Clark is going to have some things to say about this. It's basically to promote the adoption of animals and not the purchase of animals through pet stores. Now, it also allows the purchase of animals from breeders. And I think the idea behind that, and I've purchased one of my 5 dogs, 4 dogs now, but one of my 5 dogs from an actual breeder. I went to the person's home, I saw where the dog was being whelped, I saw how the cleanliness of the situation was. I think that's the distinction here. We don't want to allow animals that are being bred in cages in some factory farm to be sold in this city. And I think that's what this ordinance does. So.
And just to clarify, this also is in connection with the farmers market ordinance? Because that's, I think, part of why we brought this up again.
Yes and no. The farmers market ordinance has a separate requirement that if any live animals were to be sold at the farmers market, they would have to receive permission from the city manager.
Okay.
I don't foresee the city manager allowing live animals being sold, but there would be a situation like in this ordinance where if an adoption group, the Humane Society of Western Michigan, came forward, I would allow them to adopt animals at an event like that.
Okay.
At least that's my current perception of
And there's a difference between adopting and selling.
I believe there is.
Yeah. Any discussion on this?
So, so I'm on several buy and sell Facebook sites, and periodically I see puppies come up on those. How would this ordinance affect those, if at all?
Yeah, that's one of those things where it's very difficult to control what private people do. The sheriff's department certainly doesn't have the manpower to go door to door, check Craigslist and stuff like that. Of course, it's a hope that with the law, people will kind of self-police a little bit, but really it's aimed at factory dogs being sold at a store front. So if you're walking along the street and you see a violation going on, it can then be addressed. I don't think the sheriff's gonna go out and start checking Craigslist or anything.
Additional discussion? Mr. Hopkins?
So here under A, where it says no pet store shall offer for sale, offer for adoption, trade, barter, auction, giveaway, or otherwise transfer dogs, cats, ferrets, rabbits, long-lived birds, or other reptiles. So why would it be a pet store if they can't sell any of them?
Pet stores can sell, food and cleaning supplies and leashes and aquariums and a whole bunch of other things.
Fish.
Yeah,
Fish are not excluded.
it's the, yeah, it's not all animals. Dogs, cats, ferrets, rabbits, long-lived birds, which I'm surprised how long birds can live, and large reptiles.
And again, this language came from Kent County,
This-
correct?
Well, it originally came from Macomb County.
Okay,
Kent
but
County approved it and adopted it.
You didn't
I did
pull
not
this
write this
out
myself,
of the
no.
sky.
No. So pet stores can sell pet products, and there are some animals that they could still sell, just not these ones, which I think have been identified as animals that have suffered abuse through factory farming techniques.
Not everybody abuses them.
True.
Not everybody that sells from them are factory farmed animals.
That's true. And that's when we get to the issue of you can still purchase an animal from a home breeder. If you can go to the home and see the conditions in which the animal was bred. That's not an issue. This specifically allows that. The issue is when you have a breeder from Kentucky that has, 500 female dogs who spend their lives in cages and all they do is breed, and shipping those puppies up to Michigan to be sold in a storefront. So you have no way of verifying whether that animal's been abused, whether the animal's parents have been abused.
Madam Chair,
Certainly. Mr. Clark?
I'd like to bring everybody's attention to my list of information there. So, first of all, let me preface my comments by saying I love my dog. I have an American Eskimo, Lacey. She actually belongs to my daughter. And I am certainly on board with the concept of not encouraging what are truly puppy mills. If you looked online and looked at some of the conditions, there was a lady in New York that had something, I don't remember, 900 dogs, and it was chaos. And some of the other conditions of other than all over the country, it's true. But I agree with Mr. Hopkins that the way the situation is being portrayed isn't necessarily true for every breeder, every commercial breeder even. So, I'm going to try to hurry through all of this. This first argument is from an organization which I've never heard of. They are the organization that actually approached Kent County, and they are known as, I can get my glasses on, I'll read it, Best Friends Animal Society. And I spoke with the person who is their main policy writer. His name is John Dunn. He lives in Grand Rapids. Seems like a very pleasant fellow. If you read what it says here, their main purpose is, I think we get an idea of the aggressiveness, and I use that as a very gentle word, in what they hope to accomplish. The mission of Best Friends Animal Society is to bring about a time when there are no more homeless pets. We do this by helping end the killing in America's animal shelters. Currently, the statistics are 4 million animals are killed in animal shelters in the United States. Their goal is to make it so that no animals are killed by adopting, making sure that everybody adopts. A worthy goal. I don't argue that point at all. My feeling, though, about the organization is probably influenced by the last part of the statement that says how to fight puppy mills. Don't buy dogs from pet stores or on the internet. Please adopt instead. Spread the word, teach others about puppy mills, choose adoption. Also, not a bad idea. Now, what is a puppy mill? This is one of the biggest crux, I think, in the whole discussion. What's the difference between a puppy mill and a commercial breeder? So, I'm not going to read all this, it will take too long. But I think that what you will see is that there is quite a bit of confusion about that distinction. Puppy mills are these very heart-wrenching
Yeah.
scenes that you
Hundreds.
see, and it's just an awful thing, and you cry, you feel awful. But commercial breeders, the definition for a commercial breeder, depending on the state you're in, can be as small as having produced 20 dogs for sale in a year. Now, that's not a lot of dogs, but that can be considered a commercial breeder. And if you read through these definitions, you will see that our friends in the Humane Society, ASPCA, and Best Friends, they equate the two. If it's a commercial breeder, whatever size, it's a puppy mill. It's an overstatement, but it gets attention, and it works for them.
But I think our ordinance addresses that, am I correct?
Uh,
It's saying that it allows for
Only,
private
only
breeding.
in part, but not commercial breeders. Not commercial breeders. That's a good, and I think I agree with Mr. Hopkins. There are many, many good commercial breeders out there. If Best Friends, well, and Humane Society and ASPCA, if they get their way, they will put out of business all or most of all of the commercial breeders.
Right, but their intent isn't necessarily what we're dealing with when we're talking about an ordinance. If
Yes,
our
it is.
ordinance threads
It-
that needle.
Well, the reason that we're looking at this is because Best Friends approached the county. They went to the county board of commissioners and they said, hey, can you do this for the whole county? They said, no, you got to go to every municipality. So, but instead of sending the addresses of all the municipalities and managers back to Best Friends and saying, here they are, send out your mailing. Instead, the county commissioners, and I took Mr. Delgado to task over this, he was my contact with the board of commissioners. I said, why in the world didn't you just send them back the addresses and let them do their own work? Instead, it makes it sound like you are backing this particular position. Well, no, we didn't mean to do that. But I think that there was maybe some pressure applied, but I have no idea about that really.
Who wrote the language for the ordinance?
Macomb County.
Okay.
And I don't know if Best Friends adopted that and used it, or if they wrote it. I have no idea about that.
There was a pet store at the Gibraltar Trade Center in Macomb County called Hollywood Pets, and I've been there and I've seen that establishment when it was still operating. And they treated their pets horribly. And they had significant demonstrations every single day they were
I
open.
should remember that in the news.
So, the city of Mount Clemens approached Macomb County for assistance in drafting an ordinance that would help put that organization out of business, because they weren't, following rules of decency, I would say, in treating animals fairly. So that is what is presented to you through Kent County, because Kent County had an issue, again, I provided this information last time, with a pet store here, and Kent County contacted other counties saying, well, what do we do about this? So Kent County got it from Macomb County
Okay.
Uh,
and presented it to you.
So not from these specific people. They got it from the county.
They got it from Best Friends. I talked to Mr. Dunn. Mr. Delgado told me that it was Best Friends who contacted them, sent a letter to them. Now, they may have got the actual suggestion for the ordinance from some other source, but Mr. Dunn wrote the letter to the county. You can check that out. Let's not get lost on that.
Well, my question is more
Yeah.
about the actual language, because we need to adopt ordinances with appropriate legal language. And unless I'm confused, this looks like language that threads that needle between breeders and puppy mills.
The thing I'm misunderstanding about Mr. Clark's point is we shouldn't be discussing about where it came from.
Right,
That doesn't matter. What matters is what the language says.
right.
I think it does matter because I think the motive behind their ultimate goal speaks to a very, very, like I said before, a very aggressive position on this issue. But, okay, be that as it may, that's the difference between us.
Ms. Nixon?
ASP's,
Ms.
no,
Nixon? He's still. Oh, are you not done?
I'm sorry, I'm going fast. Just if you're reading along with me in the middle of this page here, the third page, just to demonstrate the randomness kind of how these organizations talk about puppy mills. First of all, the ASPCA says there are typically between 2,000 and 3,000 USDA licensed breeders, commonly referred to as puppy mills. A licensed breeder is called a puppy mill in their language. Then at the bottom they say the ASPCA estimates that there could be as many as 10,000 puppy mills across the nation because not all of them are licensed. But it's a guesstimate. I tried so hard to get people to give me figures. What's the research? Where do you get the numbers? Nobody would give me any answers, so that bothers me. Let's move on to the next page. And just for the sake of brevity, at the bottom of that next page it has a little chart on it. Energy needs to be focused on educating the public and reducing the demand for pet shop puppies and online retailers. Public is learning about puppy mills and eventually they will go out of business. This is their purpose, I'm telling you. They're trying to put these people, not just puppy mills, they're going to put all breeders out of business. I think it's a travesty in a country where people are doing legitimate business, they're taking care of their animals, and these organizations, which are special interest groups, they're not concerned about everyone. They're only concerned about what they see. There is an organization in West Michigan, VI Pets. Some of you have probably been to VI Pets.
My daughter works there.
Yes. They have a shop on Alpine. They have 3 other shops, one in Holland. They sell dogs in Holland. And this is my recommendation for us. I would like to see us at least consider, for the dogs at least, I'm not even talking so much about all of the other animals. What VI Pets does, they work with all the local smaller breeders, and they buy them from the breeders, they bring them into the store, they have all the paperwork, they have the mom and the pop dog, they have the location, you can go visit the breeder, just like Measure Womack said he did, which is what everybody should do. But I think that's a model that we could work with. We could encourage, if VI Pets were to come here and say, I want to start a branch here, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But, and they, in their stores, they do sell some exotics. They have some ferrets and things like that that are not included, that are included in our.
So how would you want to tweak the language of this
The
ordinance
language,
to reflect?
I haven't even gone that far. Right now, I think we're just in the beginning discussions of this. But rather than trying to, make such a drastic move that would eliminate the possibility of somebody having a store in town, maybe we could work with the breeders. There is also language where some of the rescue agencies have said, we will work with breeders, because when a breeder gets done with a female dog and the dog can't breed anymore, what do you do with it? Well, rightly, I think, it's too bad to see the dog just get killed. And so what the breeders do, they work with the rescue agencies and they give the dog back to the rescue agencies and they adopt it out. So I think a working relationship is better than a cutoff in the connection. And that's, from what I've read, what this is heading toward, which I don't think is really it's not building the community, it's not helping us accomplish anything.
Well, our ordinances can't have a slippery slope. Like, our ordinances have language that says this is what we do.
Right. Well, I'd like to see the language changed, there's no doubt about it. But because I know the organization, and I've seen other cities that have this very similar language, and they're all over, Florida, California, out west, Oregon. Best Friends is big in Utah and California and Oregon, New York, big cities, very common. I don't know of any other communities around here that have such an ordinance.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
I agree with Ms. Conley, but language is what determines our actions. And my job is to take what council tells me to redraft ordinances, resolutions all the time. So I'm happy to take any suggestions you have that we could use to change or improve the language.
Well, it's not just a change, I agree. I want the language to be changed, but it's also a change in a philosophy, basically. Instead of being in competition or trying to push breeders out of business, we would cooperate with them, work together with them, make them breeders that we we say, hey, these are good breeders, and recommend them to people. Not everybody wants to adopt.
That is absolutely not the place of government to recommend one.
Oh, it's
I
not.
agree.
I'm not saying that it is. I'm talking about the rescue agencies and groups like that that we may work with. That would be something that they could adopt as their policy.
Mr. Clark, I'm sorry, just,
Ms. Nixon?
I'm going to first, because
Go
I've
ahead.
been
Ms. Nixon?
holding it. So, as some of you may know, I last year adopted a little dog from the Humane Society. But previous to finally finding her, because small dogs are hard to come by in rescues and situations like that, we considered buying a dog. And the research that I did online, there were many reputable breeders. They had pictures of all their conditions. They had, when the dog became too old to breed, they became a family pet. Not adopted out to a rescue.
Now, is this
like
what they're
some
saying
started.
to you, or is this what you
That
saw?
is what they're saying, but I'm going to get to what I saw in a minute.
Okay.
So not adopted out to a rescue, like a used up piece of garbage, which is how I really feel about that. And they invited you out to come see the conditions. You could verify it for yourself. There are many people who do this legitimately, who are very humane, who I have absolutely no issue, because they vet the people that get their dogs. It's absolutely controlled. They're concerned for their family pet's welfare. I also, in this search, came upon a person who's no longer in business, thankfully, whose dogs were AKC certified Pomeranians, and her cages were stacked one on top of another, and you can imagine what that was like for the poor dog at the bottom. So when you have pets in a pet store, the problem is that you cannot know what conditions those pets came from. And yes, VI Pets is a wonderful place. I have myself bought animals from there in the past. They have always been wonderful to me, but the fact is you cannot know. They can say one thing, and I'm not saying that VI Pets is saying anything inaccurate, but we have to legislate to all people, not just the honest people. And I simply can't support a pet store that would sell pets that are frequently abused without knowing where they came from. I don't think this will put commercial breeders out of business. I think it will make it a home business, but I think that's appropriate. Thank you for letting me go, so I was going to explode.
Okay, Mr. Huff?
I like all this no stuff in here. No, you can't sell rabbits, you can't do it outside, you can't do it inside. Where does a kid that is working with the FFA that's got these rabbits that he wants to get rid of, says you can't even offer them to be adopted out?
Not through a commercial storefront.
It doesn't say that. It does not say through commercial, it just says no. So it depends on who's reading that language, it just says no.
Farm and fleet. They have rabbits for sale, or chickens for sale, or goats for sale. Where do they come from?
I'm sorry, I don't know if they have rabbits.
They do.
They have
Do
had rabbits.
They have
Family Farm at
chickens.
Home
I
has
was gonna
rabbits
say
as
they have
well.
chickens and ducks.
Now, if you want to have an ordinance saying, if you're going to have them for sale, you got to make sure they have adequate shade and adequate water and stuff like that. I'm all for that. You know, I'm another one, and I am not for animal cruelty. Where I come from, you shoot my dog, I shoot you.
Well, I'm not gonna put that into language in
Why
the
not?
ordinance. Even the
It's
chair
on TV.
recognizes
It's on TV.
your,
It doesn't matter.
the chair recognizes your vehemence, but, I don't think we're gonna get any ordinances about shooting.
But what I'm saying is the way
Just
this,
saying.
I'm just saying, the way this is written, the way it looks, that your FFA kids and your 4-H kids, you can't do it in Cedar Springs.
Okay, so can you make some, and again, sorry we're having a discussion on it, do you have suggestions for Mr. Manager for language adjustment?
I'm just going to disagree with what Mr. Hopkins says. If an FFA kid is doing it at his home or at his farm, you can still sell your animal at your home or at your farm. it says you can't sell it, you know, at a storefront, and you can't sell it at a roadside stand, and, you know, all these places where you can't view the situation in which the animal is being raised. That's what it's really addressing.
Yeah, but it's also saying you can't have outdoor special sale. You can't
Like
have
at a
it,
farmer's
okay,
market, that's the piece that ties into the farmer's market. They're not saying you can't sell it out of your backyard.
well, yeah, the way that's written, you would inhibit anybody from able to offer some sort of a
So,
special thing
like-
with FFA or any of them.
Public, is that the word we need? Outdoor public sale? If that's the word?
We could also do an exemption for a group like the FFA.
For nonprofit,
And that is addressed already.
right? Because that's the part where you can adopt the Humane Society and they're allowed to charge for shots.
Publicly operated animal control shelter, animal protection shelter, zoological park, private, charitable, nonprofit, humane society, etc.
Well, FFA would fall into that category. FFA is not for profit.
Why can't it remain non-profit for adoption? I understand you're trying not to get them to buy puppy mill stuff. But it says you're not allowed to offer for adoption, right? No person.
I did kind of wonder about that. I know some pet stores that will have a deal with the Humane Society where they have like, I don't know, 2 cats and 2 dogs, whatever, per week, and they bring them in to be adopted.
I think that's addressed too.
It says you can't even give them away. Why couldn't they give away?
It says at section 8-77, nothing in this ordinance shall prevent a pet store or its owner, operator, or employees from providing space and appropriate care for animals owned by an animal shelter,
Okay, so
nonprofit, humane
that's saying
society
you can do that.
for the purpose of adopting those animals to the public, which is where I go buy animal for pet supplies. I think.
They do that, yeah.
So how big of an issue is this in Cedar Springs anyway?
It isn't terribly.
The idea is to be out in front of it.
Yeah. And like Ms. Conley was saying, it's partially because of the farmer's market that I think will be starting. I've heard horror stories from Trufant and their swap meets. But yeah, it's one of those things that you just want to get ahead of before it starts.
You mean the farmer's market or the home market there in Trufant?
The flea market.
Flea market, yeah. I've not been to it, but I've heard stories.
What we could do is limit it to specifically animals for sale. Because I feel like it's less, there's not an economic incentive to breed animals to give them away. I don't feel like if you're giving animals away, you're not necessarily exploiting animals to do that.
The give them away thing, you know, if you haven't,
I guess I'm not reading it correctly then, because I feel like it's saying you're allowed to do that. Am I wrong?
near 874.
Yeah, it says no pet store shall give away.
Then down below it says no person or business, and it doesn't say anything about a pet store when it gets down to there.
In
Under
B,
B,
it says at a roadside sale in a public right-of-way, a commercial parking lot, outdoor special sale,
So this
swap
is saying a
meet,
person
etc.
can't go set up a booth on the side of the road in the easement and say puppies for sale.
or a giveaway, because nobody explained that dog that
Well,
can't go play
do
with
we want
toys.
someone doing that in public property?
But it's saying that,
Setting up a booth and,
well, not necessarily just going out and setting up a
but
public
that's what
property.
this is about.
But yes, but you're also limiting it, like when there's like a farmer's market where somebody can't give their kittens away, it's just keep giving them away.
Well, that gets into another issue, and that is whether,
Keeps it cats to stay home, I guess.
yeah, I mean, if you're going to be giving the pets away at the farmer's market, then you're going to have one of the pets be sick, and now we want to get a hold of the person who gave us the cat. And it's a headache we don't want.
Well, it's better than people washing them down the creek.
I don't feel like it's our headache. I mean, if they're giving him away, and there was something wrong with the animal, you took a free cat or dog.
You ever walk down the creek and smell the bag that was stinky? When things in Casper was not just a joke, they actually people do that with cats and dogs. They don't want them. Put them in a bag with a brick and drop them in the creek.
Well, let's just lighten up the conversation.
Well, that's why when you're saying you can't give them away.
Well, we can certainly, that's part of why we're having this conversation.
Yeah, I
Communistic.
think Ms. Nixon's thoughts on sale versus giving away, certainly we look at redrafting the language.
Yeah.
So I could redraft it with that change and any other changes maybe that councilors want to come with me, come to me in my office. We can discuss it further then, because I'm sure the crowd is getting restless. But I think it's a full ordinance that might be doable. We just have to get the language right.
Yep.
I agree. Any other suggestions, questions, discussion for Mr. Manager? And I asked him to bring this to us in light of having had a conversation with Mr. Ringler about the upcoming farmers market, and knowing that that has been an issue at the Truthland Farmers Market. I sold a bunch of kids' clothes there a year ago, and there was some conflict about whether or not that was being done in an appropriate way and who's responsible for dealing with it. And the whole combination, having heard the language earlier, I said, we probably need to get this in front of council so we can start having this conversation. So, just as a clarification, that is where it came from, is for me.
Well, it seems like a farmer's market isn't the place to sell animals
I feel that way
or
too.
give them away. A flea market is a place for that, where you're doing all kinds of stuff.
No,
Farmer's
and
market is for
feel the opposite.
foodstuffs, isn't it?
Flea market is product. Farmer's market can be fresh produce, it can be ducks, it can be chicks, piglets. Which, I'm glad you're not seeing piglets, I mean, you still get piglets.
Well, I guess that's where we disagree.
Does anybody Google the definition?
Go for it.
I guess at this point, I'm just glad I grew up in a suburb and not on a farm, because the idea of kittens in a plastic bag sinking to the bottom of the
No,
lake,
the gunny sack. They did it in gunny sacks.
whatever, it's a disgusting thought. And
There's lots of other terrible ways
Yeah.
that you don't even want to know.
Yeah.
Caution along the road.
Anyway, I appreciate everyone's input. If there's nothing else, we're going to move on to the motion item. Yeah, hold on. I just gotta. I unlike the mayor, did not print a copy. I should have, so that I could flip back and forth between the details and the.
You know, there's a thing you can hit so you get it all on the side.
Oh. Okay. I don't know if I can read it that small. Okay. So.
It makes
but
it
you can
easier to
click the
toggle
page.
back and forth.
Yeah. Oh, to toggle back and forth. I see. Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's awesome. All right. So we are on item D, the Cedar Springs Area Recreation Master Plan, as a discussion item.
Don't have a whole lot to add about this. We've already had our public hearing, and we're going to have an action item to pass it.
Okay. Anything from the rest of the council?
Looks very thorough.
Moving on to item E, wastewater treatment plant proposed contract.
Yep,
Mr. Strussman?
Sure. Mr. Strussman did negotiate out some of the terms for us. He's actually going to save some money. He has a ramp-up provision built into there where it ramps up over time. I think it's, what, a 10% increase? 9%. But he was able to negotiate a ramp-up provision, which will save us money in the first couple of years instead of going fully to 9%. I think it starts at 6% and then goes up to 9% eventually. But the original contract we had with them, I think, was below market rate. This is a little bit closer to market rate, and they've been doing a great job for us. So I have already told the company to send us their proposed professional actual contract, these are just the terms. And I'll go over those with the city attorney and bring an action item to you next time.
Okay, any other questions?
In looking at the amounts proposed there, I was a little